Hello and welcome to PoliticsToday, Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Here's what's coming up on the program. Days in fierce scarcity situation continues in parts of the country despite assurances from authorities. Stakeholders seek completion of refineries to guarantee energy security. Edo State Labour Party governorship candidate Olumide Akpata infers that wage increment for Edo workers by the state government may be political. Says if elected, he will prioritize workers' welfare. And the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tauri Lagbaja, says efforts are on to protect the country's sovereignty against any form of threats or aggression. Welcome again to the program. And whilst we're on air, we can tell you Nigerians in parts of the country are still queuing at filling stations. Some unsure whether or not they will get fuel for either their cars or generators. Although there is no clarity as to when the normalcy will be restored, Nigerians may have to endure the situation for as long as it lasts. And that's besides the buying of the product at above average price. Perhaps it's why the Independent Marketers, Petroleum Marketers Association leadership in Rivers State is urging the resident, or the president, I should say, to prioritize the completion of the ongoing rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt Refinery. IPMAN chairman in the state, Mr. Tekena Ikpaki, made the appeal in an interview with Channels Television in Port Harcourt, where he commended the initiative to reopen refineries. He maintained that the need to reactivate facilities is more pressing now than ever before.
The federal government is making taking a leap that I think, if actualized, would ease all of these distribution availability and distribution tension. In that another arm of the Port Harcourt Refinery is coming up. What it will be called, I cannot see right here, but there is an extension or expansion on the Port Harcourt Refinery. You know, we are all aware the old refinery is aged, so that is the reason for this frequent turnaround. But when a new refinery is built, you also understand that it will perform optimally, just like the Dangote refinery is doing now.
In fuel marketers or petroleum product marketers against sharp practices. At the filling station, it was discovered that they opted to sell in jerry cans to some of their friends instead of those on the queue. That's the situation. Worried by that development, the Kwara State Task Force, led by the Chief of Staff to the Governor, raided some filling stations within the metropole. The state government task force is also allaying the fears of residents of any plan to increase pump price of petrol. So that's the situation coming from Kwara State, as well as some parts of the country. As some parts are not having the issues, but a lot of Nigerians are having difficulty buying fuel either for their generators or for their cars, as we've earlier stated, which is why it's an important conversation on the program today. I'm being joined by Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, who is an economist, to help us make sense of the situation. He joins us from Abuja. So, Mr. Kelvin, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning, good afternoon, if I should say. How are you today?
Sometimes, Mr. Kelvin, sometimes it's quite difficult to know where to start from. So the natural place to start is, what exactly do you make of all of the situation with the fuel supply and the challenges we are facing now? Because the NNPCL had actually initially said that, I think about 6-7 days ago, having anticipated the situation, they are going to react and stabilize things. And later we saw that fuel became scarce, and it's still scarce in most part of the country till today. Although they were saying it's not going to last for long, but days in, we're still seeing this situation. So what do you make of this situation?
Well, the reality of the matter is, number one, Nigeria still imports PMS, premium motor spirits, today. Number two, Nigeria today, according to the government, consumes 42 million liters of PMS, which I doubt. in my view, Nigeria doesn't consume more than 32 million liters of PMS because while they audit supply, they don't audit demand. Number three, they've moved from direct sale, direct purchase to what they call PPSA, where NNPC is directly in control of most of the imports. About 85 to 90% of the imports of PMS today is controlled by NNPC against the PI provisions of PI of 2021, which says that NNPC is not supposed to control being moved from being a state oil company to a private company limited by shares, more than 30% of the downstream sector in Nigeria. Number four, NNPC owes the members of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria and Major Markets Association of Nigeria, MOMAN, for the difference between the ex-depot price, the pump price, and the real actual landing cost, because the government, as we speak today, still subsidizes petrol. Number five, the Petroleum Equalization Fund was dissolved following the signing of the PIA. Petroleum Equalization Fund basically was meant to provide like a subsidy for the transportation of PMS from the depot in Nigeria, mostly Lagos where it lands, to different parts of Nigeria. That has been dissolved. So the logistic cost that makes a price differential between the price of PMS in Lagos and other parts of Nigeria also incurs some kind of logistic debt that NNPC owes to the marketers. Now, the reality of the matter is you need backward integration. And to do that, an industrialist and an entrepreneur said, look, you know what, let's build a refinery, following the fact that application in 2007 to buy up Kaduna Refinery was rejected by the federal government, which was, in my opinion, a mistake. And he built a refinery. And today, as we speak, NMDPRA has been doing what they call technical capability tests to determine if Dangote is able to proceed to start refining. And they've done 30 days, they've done 60 days, they've done now 90 days because they started that late January. And they are about issuing what they call an LTO, license to operate, which means that he's going to soon be able to supply the markets with PMS. You know, he's already started with diesel and he's doing some other non-transportation fuels, I think. But the question now is Nigeria able to provide Dangote with the feedstock that he needs to refine and supply PMS to the market? The answer to that question is no, because if you look at the structure of the fact that NNPC owns 20% of Dangote, that is worth $2.7 billion. NNPC borrowed $1 billion from Afrexim Bank to buy up that 20% in cash, and then they have $1.7 billion in the share purchase agreement that is supposed to be supplied in feedstock of 300,000 barrels per day. Today, as we speak, NNPC net, that's when you take out that all those forces agreement it owes from, for example, the Project Gazelle, which I think was a horrible deal, by the way, and all the other debt it owes to international oil traders. Net, NNPC does not have up to 300,000 barrels per day in their joint oil agreements and in their production sharing contract. So how can they supply Dangote with crude oil feedstock? And if they are not able to supply him with light crude oil to refine, if he has to import heavy crude from either the US or from Russia or from any other part of the world, the landing cost is another 28 to 30%. How can Dangote supply the market at the prices that are reasonable enough for Nigerians to buy without the government providing subsidy to Dangote? Does it make business sense for his board to prioritize supplying Nigerian markets with products over exporting the products to other countries where he earns in foreign exchange to draw down on the remaining part of his debt and make profit for the company? So these are questions we need to answer. You know, unfortunately, when these questions are asked, the government keeps mum and it doesn't answer these questions. So if we're going to talk about scarcity of petrol, we have to address the fact that the fundamental issues are not being addressed by the government. And an NPC is to be called.
I'm happy you raised the issue because from the simple questions like there's been an argument, the government hasn't come, even since experts have been alluding to the fact that subsidy is being paid one way or the other, whether it's quasi or directly or wholly. That's a debate for another day. They've maintained, and the argument is always the fact that if we're paying subsidy, how come our FAC allocation is increasing and all of that? So this whole issue that you've raised, this very important issue that you've raised, what then is the hope of our energy security? Because we saw Dangote buy WTI. And you've talked about this supply to Dangote Refinery, and we're hoping that Port Harcourt Refinery will come upstream. Kaduna Refinery, we expect it to come up at the end of the year, according to the authorities, and all of these refineries. So if this is a challenge, what's the fate of this energy security that is being touted by the NNPCL?
Coming up with programs and then saying that you have a plan to do energy security. I mean, 2017, they came up with National Gas Development Plan, 10-year, decade of gas. Not much progress has been made with that. Even if I think that the amount of associated gas that is flared from wellheads or injected, has been reduced significantly. And this president has made some, mild changes, providing incentives and trying to increase the price of gas marginally, which even if I don't think it's at the levels that will really spur investments in non-associated gas fields and increasing the number of oil rigs and trapping gas and, gathering gas at gas gathering points. It's easy to talk about energy security at international energy conferences and, make headlines and raise the hope of Nigerians. The reality of the matter is that not much is being done on the ground, in my opinion. And the reason is because if you translate NNPC from a state oil company to a private company limited by shares, you have to go ahead and make the real actual structural changes that is required for NNPC to achieve the goals that you set for it. Okay? NNPC is the key and the foundation to, number one, addressing our foreign exchange instability today, because you need to raise your net reserves. You need to have enough liquidity in the markets to control and stabilize the exchange rate. NNPC is key to ending all the fuel queues you have today, to supplying the commercial refiners in Nigeria according to domestic crude oil supply obligations. NNPC is key to reducing the amount of dependence that we have on using debt as a means of financing the budget, which has been the practice for the last 8-9 years, that has seen the debts to the GDP, like the debt to GDP go up to nearly 40%, and the dependent on debt on the budget, the debt impairment on the budget rise from about 16.8% to around 48%, which is where we have today. Okay, and the example I like giving, because when I bring this example, people say, "Oh, you can't compare NNPCL with Saudi Aramco." But the question I have is, what's the difference actually? Saudi has oil, Nigeria has oil. Saudi has gas, Nigeria has gas. I mean, look at Qatar. Qatar left OPEC in 2019, and since then they pivoted. And Qatar today has about 120 million metric tons of LNG that is supplied to the world, and they are the third largest, and they have goal to get to 200 million metric tons, and within the next 10 years you'll be surprised they'll get there. The president went to Qatar to look for investment. Just a few days ago, I think the CEO of Qatar Gas says that they are right now not interested in investing in Nigeria, because when you build a financial model around the business case for Nigeria, in my opinion, it doesn't make any business sense. Nigeria has the highest unit production cost per barrel, and we keep talking about this, the highest unit production cost per barrel. How is it that you have the highest unit production cost per barrel? The response has been, oh, Nigeria is a difficult operating environment. It's very expensive to operate in Nigeria. When you consider the cost of security, you factor in pipeline vandalism. The question I have is, how does insecurity in Niger Delta pipeline vandalism raises the cost of unit production cost per barrel in Nigeria?
Mr. Emmanuel, so that I can take in as much questions as possible. So are you putting the blame squarely on the NNPCL in their operations? Because we also know that they are supposed to be the stock market sometime around this year. We haven't seen anything in that direction yet, because if you look at the PIA, they are supposed to be quoted, IPOs and all of that, so that as many people can get involved in that company as much as possible. So are you putting squarely this situation, not just this fuel scarcity, because we're going to talk about other issues, but this fuel scarcity and some of the things you've raised that are concerns to investors, are you putting it squarely on the NNPCL, or is it a systemic problem within the country?
I'm putting it on the NNPCL, but I'm also putting it on the presidency, because NNPCL is supposed to be a private company limited by shares. time for the presidency to hand soft control of NNPCL. Move the shareholding of the FGN, the federating units that owns the FGN, the federal government, the state governments, and the local governments, move it to an asset manager to manage. The era where you keep making phone calls and sending memos from the villa, giving directives to a private company limited by shares to control them, it's just not working. You can imagine Aramco being run the same way NNPC is run. You can imagine Qatar Gas being run the same way NNPCL is run. It's just not working. Okay? So until we realize
that... Just about my apologies. So what exactly should be done as urgent as yesterday? Because we're talking about national security here eventually. This is our cash cow. This is our bread and butter.
I'll tell you what. So while I laud the progress that the task force that was set up by the Office of National Security Advisor to tackle crude oil theft is making, I think the government has the wherewithal and the apparatus. I mean, it has 30 private external security contractors that are paid hundreds of billions of naira on a yearly basis to guard the pipelines. It doesn't have any excuse whatsoever, especially when you consider that this crude oil theft in Niger Delta has been lingering for years, year in, year out. To stop crude oil theft in Niger Delta, it can also invest in modern, sophisticated pressure and temperature metering devices that will be able to detect heat signatures and convey to an OCC terminal and coordinate with the security agencies to clamp down on people who steal crude oil from flow station to terminals. This is an issue that can be resolved because this is one of the biggest impediments, and this is the reason why you've seen the likes of Shell sell off their assets onshore to national oil companies. Mobil also is selling off their assets onshore to Seplat, to go offshore. So the question is, what is the incentive for companies to bring in investment into Nigeria to increase their rig count, to increase oil production in Nigeria? I mean, if a company discovers oil in the city of Oklahoma or in the city of Houston in Texas, for example, you will not hear onshore, you will not hear that the relationship between the government who collects royalties and taxes, the owner of the block, and the operator of the block is resulting in community squabbles, or people are coming to sabotage the oil well, or there's vandalism of pipes. You don't hear it. You only hear this kind of things.
So just as a final question for you, there's a lot to talk about apparently, but I want to find out how much more shocks can Nigeria endure with all of these things happening? Fuel scarcity, electricity tariff hike, there's suspicion that the telcos may come with their hike. All of this gamut of issues. How much more shock can the economy bear in just 1 minute?
I don't think this is the right time for the government to 100% remove subsidy like the World Bank Group and IMF has advised. The electricity sector is another headache on its own, but Nigerians are really at their breaking point, So I will really suggest that the president does what is right, hands off NNPC, audit it, forensic audit, send it to an IPO, raise money to fund capital project and stabilize the foreign exchange markets and get the company going.
I must thank you, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, for your perspective on this issue. There's a lot to talk about as far as the economy is concerned, but one of the things we always ask is that the government should come clean on some of this issue as much as possible because it's our country at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist who is bringing perspective to these economic issues. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to a quick break now. When we come back, we'll bring you more stories. Join us again. Welcome back. And now to politics, where the Labour Party governorship candidate in Edo State, Mr. Olumide Akpata, believes the Edo State governor, Godwin Obaseki, is playing politics over the new minimum wage ahead of the September governorship election in the state. Speaking with journalists shortly after a private visit to the Abia State governor, the president or the former president of the NBA, who queried the timing of the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira, says workers' wage bills should be handled way earlier and better.
5 months to exit, because we're in May now, 5 to 6 months to exit. I would like to know how Governor Obaseki intends to pay that wage bill. What are the underpinning elements that have been put in place to ensure sustainability, that a succeeding administration and indeed we intend to be the succeeding administration, can actually meet those obligations. What have you done to put in place? Stop making wages of the salary, wages of our workers an election issue. It should have been dealt with a long time ago, and this is a little too late. However, I do hope that when the month comes to an end, the Edo workers can indeed receive this amount of money as their paycheck. So we'll be watching. We'll be watching to see that this was not just a gimmick, that indeed our workers will receive the amount so mentioned. The only assurance I can give is that any government that we leave will ensure that we will do the right thing at the right time. We will not wait till the twilight of our tenure to now try to increase salaries so that we can try and appease the workers. We will immediately get on board, deal with the issue of wages, and find a sustainable way of paying the workers a living wage. Their take-home pay should be able to take them home.
Let's now move on to the assurances by the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja, that there is no relenting in the effort to rid the country of all threats to its sovereignty. According to him, the security challenges cut across the geopolitical zones, but the military has designed operational measures resulting in the successes recorded so far. The Army Chief said this during an operational tour of 23 Brigade of the Nigerian Army formations in Yola, the Adamawa State capital.
The assurances are that with the support we are receiving from Mr. President and the current government, I mentioned the fact that we're expecting some critical combat enablers in the coming weeks. The Army aviation will soon come on stream, and even on the administrative front, we have received a lot of support from Mr. President. Putting all this together, they will help to improve the morale of our troops, and from the feedback I'm receiving, the troops are ready to go and are ready to give their very best. In the foreseeable future, I see the security situation across Nigeria improving tremendously, so that Nigerians can sleep with their two eyes closed and can travel without being kidnapped along our highways. Some phases of this operation are being conducted on a multinational level with our partners on the platform of the Multinational Joint Task Force. I'm talking about Cameroon, Chad, and troops from Nigeria.
And away from security, the federal government has commenced the payment of compensation to property owners affected by the ongoing demolition of facilities on the right-of-way of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road project from kilometers 0 to 3. The Minister of Works, Mr. David Umahi, who announced this at a stakeholders meeting, says about 2.75 billion naira has been put aside to flag off the payment of compensation to some of those affected.
And I assure Nigerians that so far, if there will be any activity that is lost, they will have opportunities between kilometer 0 to kilometer 700. And so I bless Mr. President, I bless our country, and it's my pleasure to unveil the new design route to the glory of God. And I wish to flag off the compensation from Challenge 0 to Challenge 3 in a total sum of 2.75 billion. That is very, very ambitious. Very ambitious. And it's my pleasure to invite the director design and the controller to call the people and give them the symbolic amount agreed, and to assure that before 1 p.m. tomorrow, you will all get your alert as agreed.
All right, so you see there, the Lagos Coastal the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road compensation being paid by the federal government. Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics.